World of Warcraft in China just received their 20th anniversary update, and there is one big addition that they're making to their version of the game which I think is worth talking about for us over on EU and NA. These are a brand new set of realms which will be scaled up to level 80 with Wrath of the Lich King spells and talents that will rotate between a different classic raid from the first 3 expansions each week. So it makes sense that China are just getting their 20th anniversary now. I remember even during Vanilla's original release, it was delayed over there, came out in June 2005. This was due to translating all of the game assets, as well as certain custom changes, like them wanting to cover up the bare bones on the undead race. But I want to do a small recap of the situation that's led them here, because you may remember the last you heard of China and World of Warcraft is that, well, it stopped existing over there, and for over a year in fact it didn't. In brief, there was a contract dispute between Blizzard and NetEase, which meant that they didn't renew, and therefore WoW couldn't be published in China. This led to Chinese realms being entirely taken offline on January 23rd, 2023. However, over 1 year later, alongside the release of The War Within on NA and EU, an agreement was met between both parties, so WoW could once again be published in China, and it was reinstated on August 1st, 2024. So you know, just a casual year and a half of the game ceasing to exist, I guess, no biggie. And it's important to note that it's always been up to NetEase to decide exactly what happens on WoW servers in China. So whilst they'll roughly follow along the same content schedule as EU or NA, things in the game tend to be different in certain ways, which means just because China gets something, it doesn't mean EU and NA will as well, or vice versa. And due to this delay, Chinese realms are only getting up to the end of Wrath of the Lich King right now, with Ruby Sanctum just having released on July 17th. They are then going to play a mega sped up Cataclysm, and will have Mists of Pandaria by late winter 2025, spring 2026. And they're probably looking to sync back up with Western releases to keep things simple. But alongside this anniversary news they've had is a brand new set of servers called Titan Reforged Chronos, which will be releasing this November. These in short will have faster leveling to get you into the endgame, raids scaled up for level 80 combat players, so the Wrath of the Lich King level cap, and these raids will also be 25 player, not hopping between 40 and 25. Characters will use Wrath of the Lich King class design, their spells, their talents and so on, and each week a different raid from across the 3 expansions, Vanilla, TBC and Wrath, will become available. Sort of like the Fated raid rotation in Shadowlands or Dragonflight. Your old gear, tier sets and so on will be upscaled to level 80, so whatever raid you get your items from, they should be useful in whichever expansion's content becomes available next week. So you could in theory get a Thunder Fury from Molten Core and then go and use it in Black Temple or in Icecrown Citadel, or get a Shadowmourne from ICC and then use it in Vanilla, whatever it may be. I can see the gear there needing a lot of updating. For example, stats work as a numerical value, not percentages in TBC and beyond. Expertise just doesn't exist in Vanilla. Classes only have 1 tier set in Vanilla, and most of their set bonuses are pretty terrible. Can you imagine actually getting a best in slot item with all the raids in the rotation as well? What even would be this? Would it still be Onslaught Girdle? Belt of 100 Deaths? Maybe something entirely new perhaps? This will be a lot of fun for the theory crafters here, and imagine the Frankenstein Beast clown suits that you could possibly have existing here too. It also sounds like a bit of a GDKP enjoyer's dream really, and you better believe they still have them on Chinese realms. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. But let's not get too much into the detail of how exactly these realms would work. I want to talk more about the potential interest in them. Would they be good or bad? And ultimately, would this type of realm ever exist on EU or NA? So let's start off with a reminder. Again, WoW does stuff differently in China. They have not received a bunch of updates that we have. There was no Season of Discovery in China because A, WoW literally didn't exist in China when SOD started, and B, it was made by their development team over in NA. Chinese players are probably looking over to Western realms and have been doing for some time and saying, man, I want to play Vanilla with all these custom class changes, or to see Karazhan Crypts or a Scarlet Crusade raid, or I wanted a classic fresh which would carry on to TBC and beyond. So believe me, I'm sure this goes both ways. These Chronos realms would also be super raid focused and endgame focused as well, which depending on who you ask will either sound like the most ideal version of WoW ever, forever or a never-ending raid log nightmare. Blizzard themselves have recently said regarding Cataclysm and the exclusion of LFR and Mists of Pandaria that a substantially higher percentage of players are now raiding on Classic realms than they did back in the day. I don't see why this will be different on Chinese realms either. If anything, I bet they have even more people raiding over there due to the popularity of GDKP and more social acceptance of using real money to get ahead in gaming, or at least that's what you always hear about the Chinese gaming market. Raiding has been a thing that's kept people around for Classic without a doubt more than any other activity. There's still above 80,000 players raiding on Anniversary realms weekly heading into AQ40, and though the Mists of Pandaria pre-patch isn't too active at the moment, it's a pre-patch, they're never active, things will pick back up at the start of MOP. It would also put a unique spin on existing raids too, being able to mix and match gear between different expansions, opening up so many new best in slot combos. There could be unexpected gear working for certain classes, and maybe just some more class variety. Perhaps on top of that, you don't know what raid is coming next week, so it's a bit of a surprise. With Wrath of the Lich King balancing, there'd definitely be more class viability and spec viability overall. Saying that, Wrath had its own meta, as did Vanilla or TBC. For me, a never-changing meta just isn't as interesting as ongoing class balancing, but if there's something which you know you loved in Wrath, like maybe Feral Druid, Affliction Lock, Prot Pala, Disc Priest, whatever it may have been, they will once again be very strong. You're also going to have more chill and more challenging raid weeks. Imagine you go from Blackwing Lair one week to Sunwell in the next, so that's a big step up, and then the following week to ICC. What about heroic mode? Can you choose between normal or heroic? Surely heroic gear is better, right? How will that work? But the raiding won't always be face roll easy or super difficult either. Though I have to say with Wrath class balancing, a lot of the classes were more well-rounded and self-sufficient, so things may not be as difficult as they were originally intended to be. Overall, I think this would actually be pretty popular with the Classic player base, who have proven to love raiding throughout the first 3 expansions. So the big question has to be, are we realistically going to get these types of servers on EU or NA? I mean, I don't want to never say never, but if this happens, which seems unlikely to me, it won't be anytime soon. Why is that though? So again, China and EU and NA WoW are all different. It's all a Blizzard product, but it's NetEase deciding what goes in the game over there, not Blizzard NA. We did get Season of Discovery, which I mean, kind of still exists. Blizzard have expressed interest in keeping these servers around for a while for people to play, but the raiding population has cratered since the announcement that they're going to be slowing things down. But that's what happens when development stops and people realise there's not going to be much more to look forwards to. We also have Anniversary realms which have just hit the AQ40 patch at the moment, and we know that TBC will follow in winter 2025 to spring of 2026. Beyond that, I'm expecting part of the Classic announcement at BlizzCon 2026 will be for Anniversary realms to continue on to Wrath as well. So we are already kind of revisiting the Classic timeline, albeit in a normal fashion, instead of having raids from all 3 being on the menu at the same time. At the moment, to me at least, it would literally make 0 sense to re-release, I'm having to count the amount of re-releases here, a version of the game that we already have at a time when it would directly compete with our Anniversary realms. And our Anniversary realms are going to be going on for quite a while to come. That being said, with how much I think people play to raid in this game, one day perhaps this could be an idea which is more explored. It would present some issues as well with what I think will happen in the future. So again, I think Anniversary will progress from vanilla all the way through to Wrath, and we may end up with an error realm for each of those versions of the game before Anniversary restarts at some point in time. But maybe Blizzard sees the success of Chronos realms over on China and decides that instead of restarting Anniversary at the end of Wrath, they instead implement these servers and just leave the 3 error realms as they were for those first 3 expansions. I don't think having an error option for each is going to overly risk splitting the player base either. Most people want to move forwards in an MMO. Error is something something which I've always agreed with existing, but I think it's something quite niche as well. So with this timeline in mind, if Chronos Realms were to ever exist for EU and NA, it would be towards the end of Wrath Anniversary Realms, around spring 2027. This would also be around the same time when Classic Plus would have been announced and maybe released, as that should take place at BlizzCon 2026 as well. Would Chronos Realms and Classic Plus existing at the same time create too much of a conflict of interest? You know what? I'm not really sure about this question. Classic Plus should feel as though it's a main game where there is tons to do on a regular basis, with an unknown future to be excited about. Chronos, on the other hand, would just be I want to raid log something from the first 3 expansions, which, depending on the raid that's available on any given week, will take you between 1 to 3 hours per character. Overall, I do think Chronos has potential, and if we do get it, it wouldn't be for quite some time yet, but Blizzard can trial run it over on Chinese Realms first and see how well it performs. It wouldn't be for me personally, I can tell you that. I have done more than enough raid logging in all of the classic raids, but that's fine. I can still appreciate it for what it could be for players on EU and NA. I still want Classic Plus, I want something with long-term progression, with an unknown future, class balancing, all those regular MMORPG features. But what do you think of these realms though? Would you play them? Do you think my timeline sounds right if they were to release? And biggest of all, do you think these will actually happen for EU and NA? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.